I have kept a trading post at Caldero for 11 years, and in that time I have seen every kind of person the frontier produces step through my door, and drifters, grieving widows and card cheats, cavalry boys, who still believed in glory and old men who had given it up entirely. I thought I had a fair sense of people. Then the noon stage came in on a Tuesday in late September, and a woman sat down onto the Caldero dust, carrying a single carpet bag and a composure that did not belong in a place like this, and I revised my opinion of myself. Her name was Nora Caswell. She was perhaps 28, dark-haired, dressed neat but plain. A traveling dress that had seen better days and a face that had not. She looked around Caldero the way a looks at a map they have memorized, checking the territory against the expectation. Then she came to my counter and asked for a man named Hollis Pratt. I had known that moment was coming for 3 days, since Emmett Gage rode in ahead of the stage and told me what had happened out on the Vado Flats. Hollis had taken a fever at the line camp. Emmett had done everything a man could do. It hadn't been enough. Hollis Pratt was buried under a cottonwood east of the Salinas Cut, and the woman he had sent for, 300 miles by stage from a town in Colorado, the strength of 2 letters was in a photograph, was due in on Tuesday's noon run. I told Nora I would fetch the man she was looking for. I went out the back and found Emmett in the livery, which was where he had taken himself since arriving, as though the company of horses was easier to manage than the task ahead. He was a lean man, sun-darkened, with the kind of stillness that comes not from peace, but from long practice at containing what you feel. He had ridden with Hollis Pratt for 7 years. He had not slept much in 3 days. "She's here," I said. He set down the bridle he had been mending and walked out into the light. I will say this for Emmett Gage. He did not soften the news into something easier to carry, and he did not deliver it from a distance, the way some men do, as though grief is contagious. He stood 3 feet from her in the middle of my trading post, hat in his hands, and he told her straight. Hollis had taken sick. He had done everything he could. He was sorry. Nora stood very still while he spoke. When he finished, she asked one question. Was he alone at the end? And Emmett said no, he was not alone. And something passed across her face that was not quite relief, but was in the neighborhood of it. She nodded once. She thanked him. Then she set her carpetbag down on my counter and asked if I had a room she could take for the night. I had a room. What I did not have was a solution to the rest of her problem, and I suspect she knew it and was simply too composed to say so aloud. The stage south did not run again for 2 weeks. She had money enough for perhaps 4 days of lodging by my estimate. She knew no one in Caldero, or anywhere within 300 miles of it. The man she had come to marry was in the ground, and the only person in this town who had any obligation to her situation at all was a trail scout who had already discharged his duty and had his horse saddled in the livery before supper. Emmett came to me that evening after she had gone upstairs. He said he was riding at first light. I said that was his business. He stood at my counter for a long moment, looking at the door to the stairs, and then he said he would ride at noon instead, in case she needed anything settled before he left. He did not ride at noon. I am not going to pretend I know exactly when it changed for him, because Emmett Gage was not a man who announced things. What I can tell you is what I observed. The first morning, she came down early and offered to help me with the trading post in exchange for her keep. It was a dignified offer, and I took it. Emmett, who had meant to leave, found himself instead helping her carry a crate of dry goods from the back storage. And I noted that he did it without being asked. The second day, she asked him about Hollis. Not in the way of grief, exactly, but in the way of someone trying to understand a man she had almost known, and Emmett answered her more words than I had heard him put together in a month. The third day, a drover came through and spoke to her in a manner that was not respectful, and Emmett was between them before I had gotten halfway around the counter. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The drover found somewhere else to be. She thanked him afterward. He said it was nothing. She said it was not nothing. She looked at him. When she said it, in a way that required him to actually receive the words rather than deflect them, and I saw him manage that with some difficulty. The situation that pushed everything forward arrived on the 6th day, in the form of 2 men who rode in claiming that the lot behind my trading post, the one I had been building a lean-to on for 3 seasons, was part of a land parcel they had purchased off a deed from a man in Tucson. I had my own papers, but my own papers were in a strongbox, and the two men had gotten between me and the strongbox with a disposition that was not friendly. It was a standoff of the sort Caldero produced occasionally, and it usually resolved itself one way or another inside an hour. What I had not counted on was Nora. She had been in the back room cataloging dry goods when the two men arrived. She came out with a ledger open in her hands and told them in a voice as level as a surveyor's line that the lot in question was clearly recorded as belonging to the Caldero trading post in the territorial records, that she had seen those records that very morning. She'd been organizing my files, and that if they wished to contest the matter they were welcome to ride to the county seat and do so lawfully, but that she doubted the ride would repay them. She said all of this without raising her voice or taking a step back. The two men looked at her and then at Emmett, who was standing by the door in that way he had, still and waiting. They calculated something. Then they rode out. When they were gone, Emmett looked at her for a long moment and said, "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know." He said, "You knew those records were in order," she said. "I put them in order 2 days ago. I thought it might matter someday. Expect it to be today." Something shifted in his face. Not dramatically. Emmett Gage did not do things dramatically. But it shifted. That night he sat at my counter after she'd gone up and said, almost to himself, that he had nothing to offer her. No land, no house, no ranch. A scout's wages and a good horse, and a reputation for being reliable in rough country. She had come 300 miles expecting a homestead and a husband with property. I told him what she had come 300 miles for was a life, and that a life was not the same thing as a deed. He thought about that. The stage south came on the 14th day. I did not see Emmett that morning, which I took for a sign. Nora came down with her carpet bag at the regular hour and set it on the counter and looked at the door, and I thought for a moment she was going to pick it up again and walk out, and that would be the end of it. Then Emmett came in from the back, from the direction of the livery, and he had not saddled his horse. He carrying his hat and turning it in his hands the way he did when he was working up to something. And he stood across the counter from her and said that he understood she had come here with expectations he could not meet, and he was not asking her to pretend otherwise. But if she was willing, he would like to try to be useful to her, not as what she had come for, as what he actually was, which was a man who knew this country, who was steady, who did not lie, and who had found over the past 2 weeks that leaving was harder than staying. Nora was quiet for a moment. Then she said she appreciated a man who knew the difference between what he was and what he was not. She set her carpetbag down. The stage left without her. I am not a sentimental man. 11 years at a trading post in Caldero will work that out of you. But I will say that I have thought about that, morning more than once in the years since. 2 people with nothing to recommend the arrangement except honesty and a willingness to stay. No property exchanged, no promises made in haste. Just a woman who had ridden 300 miles with her chin up and a man who had finally found something worth being still for. Looking at each other across a trading post counter in the dust and the morning light. And choosing. They built their place 6 miles east of Caldero, on a stretch of flat ground, near a good spring. I rode out to see it the first winter. Emmett had put up a solid cabin. Not large, but tight against the wind. Nora had a kitchen garden going along the south wall. She had also, I noticed, organized his supply ledgers with the same brisk competence she had brought to mine. I asked him how it was going. He said it was going fine. For Emmett Gage, that was a considerable speech. I rode home in the early dark, and the range was cold and wide on every side, and I thought that the frontier had a way of stripping a thing down to what it actually was. And that, sometimes if a person was patient and honest and willing to stay, what was left was enough.